Daniel Reyes rarely visited the county courthouse, but that morning, a routine oversight meeting for the State Judicial Standards Commission had brought him downtown earlier than expected. With 20 minutes to spare before his meeting, he wandered into a nearby courtroom simply to wait somewhere quiet, taking a seat near the back of the mostly empty gallery. He hadn't intended to watch a custody hearing. He certainly hadn't intended for it to matter to him personally. But as the proceedings unfolded in front of him, something about the case caught his attention and refused to let go. At the front of the courtroom stood a woman named Vivian Hale, alone at the defendant's table, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She had no attorney beside her, only a thin folder of paperwork and an expression of quiet, controlled desperation. "Ms. Hale," the judge said, glancing briefly at the file in front of him, "you understand the seriousness of these proceedings. Your daughter's father is requesting full custody, citing your recent medical leave and financial instability as grounds for concern." "I understand, Your Honor," Vivian said, her voice steady despite the visible strain beneath it. "But I've recovered fully from my medical situation. I have stable employment now, and I've never once missed a scheduled visitation. I simply couldn't afford proper legal representation for today's hearing." The judge nodded briefly, his expression unreadable, before turning to the opposing attorney, a sharply dressed man representing Vivian's ex-husband, who proceeded to present a series of documents and arguments with practiced, confident precision. Daniel watched closely, noticing several procedural details that troubled him. Certain evidence being presented seemed selectively framed, omitting recent medical records that clearly demonstrated Vivian's stability. Worse, when Vivian attempted to introduce documentation showing her recovery and current employment, the judge dismissed it quickly, citing formatting technicalities rather than reviewing its actual content. By the time the hearing recessed for a short break, Daniel found himself unable to simply walk away. He approached Vivian carefully in the hallway outside, introducing himself calmly. "Ms. Hale, my name is Daniel Reyes. I watched part of your hearing today. I hope you don't mind me saying, but it seemed like you weren't given a fair opportunity to present your case properly." Vivian looked at him warily, clearly guarded after the stress of the morning. "With respect, Mr. Reyes, I don't have time for sympathy right now. I need actual help." "That's exactly what I'd like to offer," Daniel said. "I'm not a lawyer, but I chair the state's Judicial Standards Commission. I noticed several procedural issues in there that concern me deeply: evidence dismissed without proper review, testimony rushed through without adequate consideration." Vivian's expression shifted slightly, cautious interest replacing her earlier defensiveness. "What exactly are you offering?" "First, proper legal representation," Daniel said. "I know an excellent family law attorney who handles cases like this pro bono when procedural fairness is in question. Second, I intend to formally request a review of today's proceedings through appropriate channels, not to influence the outcome directly, but to ensure the hearing follows proper legal standards moving forward." "You're not going to just tell the judge what to decide?" Vivian asked carefully. "Absolutely not," Daniel said firmly. "That's not how this works, and frankly, it shouldn't work that way. What I can do is make sure you have real representation and that any procedural violations are properly documented and reviewed. The outcome needs to be decided fairly, based on the actual facts of your life, not on who has better legal resources in the room." Vivian considered this carefully, exhaustion and cautious hope mixing plainly across her face. "All right," she said finally. "I'll accept that help." Within the hour, Daniel had contacted Miranda Cole, a respected family law attorney known for her meticulous, principled approach to custody cases. Miranda reviewed the morning's proceedings quickly, immediately identifying several clear procedural errors, including the improper dismissal of Vivian's medical and employment records. When the hearing resumed that afternoon, Miranda formally requested a continuance, citing the need for proper review of previously dismissed evidence and adequate representation for her client. The judge, now aware that formal procedural concerns had been raised through the Judicial Standards Commission, granted the continuance without objection. Weeks later, with proper representation and all evidence appropriately reviewed, the custody hearing resumed under significantly fairer circumstances. Vivian's stability, recovery, and consistent involvement in her daughter's life were finally given the careful consideration they deserved. The judge ultimately ruled in favor of continued joint custody, specifically noting the strength of Vivian's testimony once properly presented. Afterward, standing outside the courthouse, Vivian approached Daniel, her daughter's small hand held tightly in hers, relief evident across her face. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. You didn't have to get involved. I couldn't watch someone lose something so important simply because they didn't have the resources to be heard properly, Daniel said honestly. The system is supposed to protect fairness. Sometimes it just needs someone willing to make sure it actually does. Vivian's daughter looked up curiously at Daniel. Are you the reason mommy gets to keep seeing me? Daniel knelt down gently, meeting her eye level. Your mommy did all the real work, he said softly. I just made sure everyone got to see it properly. The girl smiled, seemingly satisfied, before wrapping her arms tightly around her mother's leg. Over the following months, Vivian's life slowly stabilized further, her career steady, her relationship with her daughter secure and protected. Daniel, meanwhile, found himself newly motivated in his role on the Judicial Standards Commission, personally pushing for expanded access to legal aid resources for parents navigating custody proceedings without adequate representation. Months later, during a community fundraising event supporting legal aid services, Vivian approached him once more, her daughter now confidently introducing herself to other children nearby. You changed everything for us, Vivian said quietly. Not by pulling strings, but by making sure the truth actually got heard. Daniel considered her words carefully. That's really all fairness ever requires, he said. Just someone willing to make sure the truth gets a proper chance. As he watched Vivian and her daughter continue confidently through the crowded room, Daniel felt a quiet, steady satisfaction, the kind that came not from wielding power, but from ensuring it was used honestly, in service of people who simply needed to be heard.